Things are coming together really nicely. There's one other little detail we need to do on this hood before we start kind of jumping into getting in, more detail elsewhere, and that is to get the exhaust vents on the left side of the car, and they're not visible on both sides. So I've gone ahead and mirrored this across, so we have both sides of our vents already here, and that way this side can stay unadulterated as it is, and this other side is where we're going to add those exhaust vents. So let's go back to the right view here, and the exhaust vents go roughly here and here. But I think in this underlay, the vents are a little bit small. If I look at this reference, for example, see these guys look really nice and big, and I think that's definitely going to be necessary with a ginormous engine like this one. Anyway, so to get those in there, oops, looks like I hit the wrong button. Let's get these back, and there we go. Next, we need to basically make room for those to exist, because right now, if I unsmooth everything, these look okay. Like I could put an exhaust vent there, but like I'm saying, I want to make them bigger, and we need to jog these vents downward some to make room for that. So let's talk about a method by which we might do that. And that's basically to just remove some geometry and add it back in. So let me hide these backdrop items. Go to the top view, and I'm just going to select half of this stuff on the one side and H for hide, just so we're not accidentally messing with that. Go back to the right side, and we can get to work. Now, the first thing to do would be to remove some of these polys right about like that. I want those ones. But a quick way to get those, rather than using the lasso like I just was using, is to right-click somewhere out in your viewport, go down to Lasso Style, and change it to Rectangle. Now I can middle drag across and get a nice rectangular selection. And just make sure that we cover up everything. There we go. So that's going to get everything inside there, and I can delete those polys. Excellent. Now I can use the same trick here to grab these ones, and then I'll just cut them, Control X and Control V to paste them. All that's done is sort of separate them out so they're no longer connected to everything else here. If I double click them, it will only select those. Now I'll move them down like so that they fit about like that. But if we go to perspective view, you'll see that those are actually, they're gonna need to move out as well. So let's go to the front view here. And we just need for these to look like they're a little bit closer to matching. I'm just going to rotate these around so that they're matching up, visually with everything else, roughly. That looks pretty good. And now we just need to connect this up. Now, we could use the Topo pen for that, but Topo pen has background snap, which can tend to cause problems if you're not actually trying to snap to the background. So a similar tool is to go to Basic, tools. Actually, sorry, let's go down to Vertex Tools and use Drag Weld right here. Drag Weld will, in this case, do something very similar to the Topo pen, where I can drag it and snap it to other things very easily, just like that. And it's still very easy to do, but without the background constraint issues. I'll start in the back here. Let's start with this one. Snap that. Okay, with those in place, now we can grab these two edges and these two edges and just head to our basic tools and down to Bridge. Click in the viewport, and that should fill this in automatically as of Moto 801, because we have this checkbox in 801 called Auto Connection, which is fantastic. It basically makes sure that we have exactly the right number of spans to fill everything in. Now in this case, probably the old bridge tool would have worked fine because a single span fits here. But the new bridge tool is way, way more awesomer because it can do any number of sides and have them match up perfectly. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, because in this case it doesn't really matter. Let's go back to the right side here. I'll just grab my vertex selection mode, and I'm going to grab some of these vertices right about like that. And we'll grab some of these ones as well, all the way across to there. Let's go back to perspective, make sure we have the right stuff. Excellent. And then I'm just going to move those up because I don't need the vents. I don't need quite that much space, right? I've got a little bit too much space. Let's go to the front view, see what those look like. I just need them to match up close enough so that when they're curved, they'll look okay. That looks a little more like it, right? So let's hit Shift Tab and see what that looks like. And I'm seeing, the smoothing isn't quite right at this point. It looks very different from these guys. And that's to be expected to a certain degree. So first of all, let's just fix this up. Let's select this entire chunk here. I'm going to go to Mesh Edit and down to Mesh Cleanup. Make sure that everything is all nice and clean on there. Select this guy one more time. Let's go to Mesh Edit or Vertex and down to Merge. And I'm going to set this from automatic to fixed, and we're going to merge verts that are within 1 millimeter of one another, and hit OK. Okay, so that's pretty clean. So everything is all merged up the way that it should be. I think the only other issue at this point is probably going to be edge weighting. I think we've probably just got some weird edge weighting starting to happen in some places. For example, we have these nice clean edge weights here, but I don't think these have them. And the way we can tell that is to hit Control-2 on the keyboard to get our view shading pie and head over to Vertex Map Shading. Or up here at the top, of course, we could go to Vertex Map Shading. Head over to our Lists tab here in the Model tab, and head down to our weight maps. Under that, we have a subdivision weight map, and that'll show us where the weight values are currently assigned for the subdivision. And notice that we have weights assigned on most of these edges, but not on these, not on this one, not on this one. And I think that's about it. I'm not seeing any others missing. So let's take those, assign a weight to those. I think that actually whatever was the default, probably like 25, looked about correct. Now those guys are weighted properly. Let's go back to Advanced OpenGL, and that is looking a lot more like it. Now, this area in here is still not fantastic because we have this super pole here that's kind of pulling things around in a funny way. And but frankly, for what we're doing, for our purposes, I think this is going to be just fine. If I try out reflection mode and look around, it looks like stamped metal, and that's what matters to me. This stuff in here doesn't really need to be perfect. If we wanted it to be, obviously we could jump in there and mess with our topology and try to clean things up a bit. But for our purposes, I think this is going to be just fine. So the only other thing is to actually add the vents in here. So let's go back and unsmooth this stuff for a moment. We'll select these polys. I'm going to B for bevel those, click in the viewport and drag the red handle to pull in that bevel slightly. Shift click to do that again, and we'll pull that back a bit. And let's just delete those polys. And that looks pretty much exactly right, I think. If we wanted to, we could harden up these edges a little bit just by selecting these edge loops around in the borders. So select these guys. And we could run our edge weight tool and add some weight to those if we want. 16% looks pretty good, so let's go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Shift W, click in the viewport to apply that 16% weight, and that looks okay. Okay, so now we want to add in these the actual exhaust vents themselves, the exhaust pipes themselves. And a quick way to do that might be to start with a piece of geometry here. So let's hit L for loop to get that, and we'll get L for loop to get that. I'm going to copy that geometry, then select all of this stuff. In fact, let's just select the whole body here, and H for hide to hide it, and then Control V to paste. The only reason I hide the other stuff is because these guys will land right on top of that existing geometry. which isn't quite what I wanted. Now R for scale, let's set our action center to local so that we're scaling each of these from its own center. We'll just scale these out on the Z a bit, scale them in on the X a bit, and in on the Y a bit. That looks okay. I will unsmooth those for the moment. Select these interior edges, Z for edge extend, click in the viewport and pull these back just a smidge. And I'm going to also scale those down a bit and rotate them in. And let's move those down just about like that. Z for edge extend, click in the viewport, rotate those down, just move them, something like this. I'll even just scale them in. So that gives us sort of a periscope shape that we'll be using for this. Let's select these guys, and just in case there are any problems with this, let's go to Mesh Edit, Mesh Cleanup. Just make sure there were no issues. Looks like we had some face normal issues in there. I was just seeing some weird dark lines. Maybe I clicked something funny. Who knows? Sometimes it's hard to know. You get used to seeing stuff like that. I just noticed some dark lines somewhere and thought, better double check. Okay, so we have this stuff. Let me hit U for unhide to see everything else. And if we shift tab on these guys so that they're smooth, it looks pretty good. Those match up pretty much the way that I would have hoped. I want to sharpen these edges, I think, a little bit. So let's take those and add an edge weight to them. That looks nice. That looks really good. And finally, we just need a little bit of thickness on these. And rather than bother with doing an entire thickness on those, let me just hide this. Oh, well, why not? Let's just Shift-Tab to unsmooth for a second. Take both of these guys and go over to Basic and try or thicken out. And let's just thicken outward a little bit. That looks pretty good. And the reason, so we've got an offset amount here. I probably don't need more than, I don't know, 5 millimeters, something like that. The scale, you want to leave that at 100%. We're not scaling this at all. Also, your smoothing angle is one thing to watch out for on this tool. If you happen to have this at a very low smoothing angle, then you're going to start to get these corners acting strangely. So make sure to set that smoothing angle up to something pretty high so that we don't get any strangeness happening on the corners. And also, you want to check this sharp box here and uncheck it and check it and see which one works better. In some scenarios, you'll want that sharp corner, and in other scenarios, you won't. So for me right now, I don't need that. Hit Escape to drop the tool, Escape to drop that selection. Let's Shift-Tab to smooth everything, and then U to unhide. And the only other thing is, it looks like we're getting some of this stuff isn't quite edge-weighted the way it should be. So let's select these edges all the way around for all of the corners, just getting the entire edge loop for each one. Shift-W, click in the viewport. Now those will all be weighted the same, and we can pull those down a little bit, whatever we need to do to make them fit really nicely in these corners. And finally, I think these outer edges probably want to be weighted as well. I would like for these to be kind of flat on the front. So let's add some weight to those. That looks pretty good. I don't know. That looks like an exhaust, and that looks quite similar to this. Yeah, not too bad. All right, so that does that. Let's. So one problem that I'm noticing is that half of our model is not smooth, and half of it is. And if I hit the Tab key, it's just going to flip. So this stuff is smooth, and this stuff is not. So let's fix that really quickly, and this is a really important technique to know about. If we head over here to the Lists tab in the Model viewport, down here at the bottom we have a Statistics area, which is incredibly powerful. So let's go down to our polygons here, and we can select polygons by type. If we go down here, we can click the plus sign to select faces, i.e. unsmooth polys, and there they are. Or I could select the subdivs by clicking the plus sign to the left of that. We don't have any of those. Or clicking Catmull-Clark, and that gives me those. So what I'll do is select those, hit Shift-Tab, so now nothing is smooth. Deselect and Shift-Tab, and now everything is smooth. Alright, so that's a really important technique to know about. Make sure to practice using that Statistics tab.